In the Beginning by Dr. Walt Brown, page 243. Was the Grand Canyon formed by draining water at the end of the flood? The list of evidence require an explanation on page 229 and figure 125 on page 230 give many reasons the water source could not have been the Colorado River. Also, a little thought will show that the Colorado Also, a little thought will show that the Grand Canyon was not carved simply by draining surface water at the end of the flood. If floodwaters draining all over the earth at the end of the flood carved the Grand Canyon, there should be hundreds of similar huge canyons worldwide. An attempt to show that the canyon formed at the end of the flood produced no evidence, as explained in Note 9 on page 570. But the answer to question 2 below provides evidence that the Grand Canyon was carved in weeks, at least a few centuries after the flood. Deep water draining off a continent after a flood erodes relatively little solid material per volume of fluid. Most erosion occurs within the thin boundary layer at the fluid-solid interface. Therefore, a thin, fast, continuous sheet of water spilling downhill from large lakes will transport large volumes of sediments. This accounts for the great denudation over 10,000 square miles in the funnel and south and west of the funnel and the carving of the Grand Canyon. Likewise, 2,000-foot waterfalls spilling from both Grand Lake and Hopi Lake had great eroding power. Everyone agrees that water carved the Grand Canyon, but there would be no Grand Canyon if it were not sitting on a mile-high plateau. Great height gives water the great energy needed to carve and remove so much material. So, A, how and when was the Colorado Plateau lifted an average of 6,200 feet above today's sea level? And B, how did so much water rise that high? Today, if all the land above sea level were pushed below sea level, so all the Earth's water was raised as far as possible from the center of the Earth, sea level would rise only 800 feet, not enough to cover the Colorado Plateau, that today rises 6,200 feet above the sea level. Therefore, draining floodwater did not carve the Grand Canyon, as some have claimed, and the Colorado Plateau, littered with marine fossils, must have risen by more than a mile after the Genesis flood. As explained on page 129, plateaus were lifted slowly after the flood by the sinking of major mountain ranges that were suddenly buckled up during the compression event. Right after the flood, lakes were much more abundant than today because continental basins, formed primarily during the compression event, retained much of the draining floodwater. Over time, some lakes lost water by evaporation, seepage, or breaching. However, lakes on the upward side of mountain ranges, lakes on the upwind side of mountain ranges received much of the heavy post-flood precipitation the mountains intercepted. Lakes also gained water and deepened, even at high elevations, from springs flowing out of the mountains and freshly elevated cliffs.